Israel's relationship with America is wonderful, but our dependence on them is very, very detrimental to the country. Look, I'm all for friendships. I'm all for allyships. I think they're amazing when they support both sides. But being completely codependent is actually deeply unhealthy. And that's something that more and more Israelis are recognizing. What am I talking about specifically? Well, about military arms. What a lot of people don't know is that Israel is tied into a very, very locked up deal, which basically means that all of the funding that comes to us, all of that military aid, we are obligated to spend back in America, therefore sustaining the American economy and the military economy, and making sure that Israel is basically almost, not entirely, but almost completely dependent on America for their tech and their intelligence. I'm not talking about high tech, I'm talking about military tech. Now, if you were to think to yourself, where in the world should become a military superstar when it comes to development of arms and planes, etc., it would make sense that it would be Israel. Not just because of our wars, but because of our unbelievable technological advancement. Every man here basically graduates from the IDF, has a deep understanding of the military and how it works and the flaws and things that are needed. And then they go into high tech and they apply that to AI and they apply that to finance and they apply it to many different industries. And they could definitely be applying it to military as well. But because of these deals, we have this very unhealthy dynamic in which we basically need to receive most of our things from America. And America's military abilities are amazing and unprecedented. But what that means is that Israel is always dependent on not just a good relationship with America, but on a very forthcoming president who's happy to give us the arms that we need. And that has proven to be very dangerous. Look, with Trump, it works out and it's okay. However, with Biden, that was really not good. And it really hindered our war abilities when they said they were going to just stop sending us arms, etc. But who's going to be the next president is also an important question to ask. But let's just even talk about the Trump dynamic, because I think this is really important. And all of this has a point, which I'm going to get to in a second. Despite Trump truly being a wonderful friend of Israel, a really, really tremendous friend of Israel, the fact that we are so dependent on him means that he can make asks of us, of course, which are often not aligned with what the Israelis actually need. They are way more aligned with the American goals. And again, that's his prerogative, right? If somebody's going to pay for your university degree, then you're going to be obligated to do the things that he wants you to do, or to go to the place that he wants you to study. That's kind of how it works. Now, again, the money that is given to us is used right back into the American economy. It's not like this money is just funneled and spent all here. But that is a problem that we're seeing happen more and more and more. Israel not only has to focus during a time of war immensely on our diplomatic relationship with America, but is also often stuck doing things that are really to our detriment, which is why here in Israel it has become more and more and more accepted and understood that we have to slowly figure out how to remove our dependency. And that starts with us building our own military abilities here, our own military infrastructure, which is going to be very complicated to do because this deal that we have with them kind of keeps us quite locked in what I would describe as golden handcuffs. And more to the point, when you start to break a deal, you risk a relationship. And that leaves us in a time of buffer. And what do we do about that? And how exactly do we go about that? For example, let's say we're about to hit Iran 2.0 and people are discussing that, the next part of the war with them. If we don't have America on our side, or if we anger America, then they don't provide us our military protection that we need, all hell could seriously break loose. And so this is a constant question that's being asked. But yesterday, a headline was released, which is obviously a false headline, but a headline was released to the public saying, Israel and America have just signed this big 20-year military deal. And obviously the Americans who are anti-Israel went completely nuts and absurd. But the Israelis also weren't very happy with it because they want out of this dependency on America. Let's see what Bibi Netanyahu has to say about this. But first, please make sure that you're subscribed to our channel. 85% of you have not yet hit that follow button. It is totally free. But if you want to support us, you can become a member or hit that buy me a coffee link or buy some of our merch, which happens to be, in my opinion, absolutely amazing at meiraK.com. Thank you for that. We really need your help and support. As you see, we are growing every single day and it's amazing, but it's because of people like you hitting that button. So let's watch what Netanyahu has to say on this whole topic, because he, at the end of the day, is going to be the deciding factor on what happens with the future of our relationship with America.
You were a few moments late, clearly running a country, so you're forgiven, but I'm glad you were, because this headline just dropped, and I want to start the interview by asking for your reaction to it. It's on the Axios news site, and it says, Scoop, Israel seeks 20-year military aid deal with US with America First tweaks. Is that correct?
I don't know what they're talking about. My direction is the exact opposite. When I first, in 1996, I went to the U.S. Congress and we were receiving financial aid and military aid. And I said, the first thing is, we're going to build a high-tech, free market capitalist economy. We don't need the financial aid. Phase it out. And everybody gasped. How dare he, this young prime minister eager for a PR title. He's giving up billions of dollars. And I was happy to do it, and I was right to do it. So we got rid of that. Now I want to make our arms industry independent, totally as independent as possible. So my direction is the exact opposite. I don't know who's talking for Israel. I do. So follow what I say, not...
I love it when he does that. First of all, can you guys see that picture of Sarah Netanyahu looking like an absolute, supermodel? I love that. I think it's so sweet. I mean, the relationship is up to a lot of debate, but I think that's interesting. What he's saying here is really important. Okay, first of all, he says that that's not true and it's false reporting. Surprise, surprise, it's coming from Israel. I love the fact that he's like, I speak for Israel. Me, I the prime minister. That's what I do, not what them do. I speak for Israel. So I love that. But what he's saying here is important because this is going to be a big indicator as to where our diplomacy moves in the next few years. And it's going to be imperative that Netanyahu stays in power to move this kind of thing forward. Now, I'm not going to go nearly as far as to say as he leaked the story so he could rebuke it and touch upon this topic because he isn't sure. But this is a very classic Netanyahu elections tactic. If you don't know, in Israel, we're heading towards elections now in the next few months. It'll take about a year. And there's a big debate. Will Netanyahu stay in power? He's definitely going to continue running, but is he going to stay in power? And he's now coming off the back of the Iran win and the Hezbollah win and the hostages won. I mean, it's enormous wins. And so he has more and more of a chance to really become prime minister again. But he has to prove to people not only that he has wins, but that the future of Israel is incredibly dependent on him being in power. And that's why I'm not surprised to see that we're going to start to see him sneaking in all these different things that only he can really pull off. And I will say this. If there's anybody who can pull this off, it's going to be Bibi Netanyahu, because it's going to be incredibly tricky diplomatically to do this. Incredibly, especially with a president like Trump, who is very, very interested in us being financially dependent on him, and because they gain from that financially. Imagine what happens to America's economy, my military economy, if Israel's militarily completely independent and a competitor. This is going to be a very, very tricky line to navigate, and there's only Bibi Netanyahu to do it. However, the opposition to Bibi is going to say, well, why didn't he do this over the last 20 years? Suddenly now he's remembering. And it could be that it's suddenly now become more and more important than ever, because we realize after October 7th how bad it is, and we also see how bad the US relations are. However, it's going to be an interesting thing for us to watch. Let's see what else he has to say.
What is put forward in some leaks that are not true.
So, Prime Minister, you think it's time to cut military aid entirely from the US?
I think it's time to assure that Israel is independent. Understand that our military aid is like a fraction, a tiny fraction of what the U.S. spent in Afghanistan or spent in, in the Middle East. It's tiny. But, I think that we have a very strong economy. We have a very strong arms industry. And it's true that even though we get what we get, which we appreciate, 80% of that is spent in the United States. It produces jobs in the United States. But nevertheless, I'd like to see a much more independent Israeli, and even more independent Israeli defense industry. And remember that Israel doesn't ask others to fight for us. Israel is the one American ally in the world that says, we need boots on the ground. We don't need American servicemen fighting, on the ground for Israel or around Israel. We're fine. We fight our own battles, but in doing so, we also serve important American interests, like preventing countries that chant death to America from having nuclear bombs to throw at America, and so on.
I think this is an important thing, and people will push back on this, because America did send their servicemen to Iran, not boots on the ground, but they sent their planes, and America was highly involved in this. I don't know if people are going to like Netanyahu saying, we take credit for everything that goes on in Iran, because America was highly involved. But again, that to me is like the ideal balance. America has something that we don't have. We have something that they don't have. Great, let's combine it and work together. Not to be in the situation that we are currently in, which is if America doesn't provide us the things that we need, we're in trouble. Also, Israel needs to strengthen its economy enormously after the war. And one of the best ways for us to do that is through our military intelligence abilities, through our ability to produce aid, because it's an enormous, enormous market. And whilst I'm not giving this professionally because I know nothing about investing, I would wager that it would be a good time to start investing in Israel's military production possibilities, because it's probably going to be a huge area that people try and get to. And it will probably be very, very successful, seeing Israel's past and all of its knowledge really kind of combine into this. So that's going to be interesting to see if he'll get pushback for saying this.
So my direction is independence. My direction is not greater dependence. My direction is greater independence. And I'll probably have something to say about that very soon.
What's a realistic timeline for that?
Oh, I think we're already we're already going there. In fact, this afternoon I'm having a very important meeting exactly on this subject.
Okay, you guys know I love Bibi Netanyahu, but I also know this guy is very, very, very good at moving the media in the way that he needs. I am now almost 100% convinced, no, that's not true, I'm like 70% convinced that his department was involved in the leaking. I don't know that for a sure fact, but it would seem to me that they would leak this kind of story so that he could come out and rebuke it and be like, this is exactly what we're doing. This is going to be very helpful for him in elections here in Israel. Enormously helpful, because he's basically promising a future of a secure economy here and explaining everybody understands that nobody else can trace this kind of thing and do this kind of thing. And so I think this whole thing seems very coincidental that he's now having meetings about this and announcements about it is coming out soon. Not only is he able to say the media is problematic, but he is also in addition able to really showcase his position and prove to the Israeli people more than the American people, but also to the American people, because that's important now as well, that we are interested in removing our dependency from America. Look, at the end of the day, the less dependent we are, the less people are going to be able to complain about it. They're going to complain about everything in America. They're going to call the Jews out all the time. But if we're not dependent on the military, then we don't need their aid. The arguments against us grow less and less and less. So I think it's an interesting coincidence. As you all know, I absolutely adore a lot of the things that Netanyahu does. I think a lot of the things that he does are not okay and against what I personally believe should be done. But I'm also not the Prime Minister of Israel. I'm not the person who's been sitting on that chair for so many years who truly understands the depths of it. And I don't try and judge it. I do try and analyze and understand it. And hopefully you found this insightful. Thank you for your attention to this matter.